The rocky shore. A harsh and exposed environment. The species that call this home face problems of competition, predation, wave action, and drying out. Adaptations to these stresses have led to a huge level of diversity in this habitat. Sea anemones are a common organism located along much of the UK coastline. From the phylum Cnidarians, they are a relative of jellyfish and corals. The importance of anemones within an ecosystem is often underestimated. Many species rely on them as food sources and even homes. In fact, almost 100 different species have been observed in association with them, and in some parts of the world they're even consumed by humans. These creatures are found anchored to rocks in rock pools and in shallow waters. Normally just a few centimetres in diameter, some are known to be over a metre wide. Formed of an adhesive foot, a column-shaped body, and anywhere from tens to hundreds of tentacles, surrounding an opening that functions as both mouth and anus. Actinia equina, commonly known as the Beadlet anemone. Usually a bright red colour, with a bright blue line of spots around its base. When threatened, the 6 rows of up to 192 tentacles can withdraw into the column in order to protect themselves against predators. When out of water, this ability, coupled with the secretion of covering mucus, also helps to avoid drying out. Anemonia viridis, the snakelock anemone. It takes either a grey or a green form with purple tips on its tentacles. The green form is caused by a mutually beneficial relationship with algae that live inside of their cells. Its column is up to 7 centimetres wide, and the tentacles can span up to 20 centimetres. These tentacles are rarely withdrawn, but are used to fight off other species by striking them from a distance. All anemones contain stinging cells in their tentacles, which, when disturbed, launch toxins in a harpoon-like structure into the organism that triggered the movement. This venom paralyses the prey and allows the anemone to move it towards its ever-waiting mouth. Waiting here is a collection of digestive enzymes that can break down a small organism within 15 minutes. As effective carnivores, they mainly feed on small fish and shrimp. And it's these harpoon-like structures that give anemones their characteristic sticky feeling when touched. Anemones spend most of their time attached to the rock as sessile creatures, holding on by their sticky, muscular foot. But they can detach when threatened by a predator or when under unsuitable conditions. Once loose in the water, they flex muscles in order to swim to their new rocky home. As territorial animals, they often have to fight hard to protect their home. The Beadlet anemone's blue spots, called acrohagi, contain many stinging cells used to fight off predators and competition from within the species for the best location. Snakelock anemones lack this concentrated spot of stinging cells and physically repel oncomers by striking them with their longer tentacles. Over the course of evolution, anemones, as with all creatures, have adapted to their surroundings. Some are coloured in such a way to merge with their background, especially camouflaging with neighbouring seaweeds to hide from predators. Although appearing to be solitary creatures, they can share an unusual and intimate relationship with hermit crabs. These crabs often pick up young anemones, which attach to their shells for life. Living in harmony, the anemone's venomous tentacles protect the hermit crab, and in return, it gets to finish off any scraps of food that the crab may leave behind. This symbiotic relationship is beneficial for both species, as they work together to help each other, as well as themselves. Isolated in rock pools, where there are no members of the opposite sex, for many species, reproduction would be impossible. Anemones, however, can overcome this problem by producing clones of themselves, as well as being able to reproduce sexually. Beadlet anemones reproduce asexually by a process called pedal laceration. During this, pieces of the column break off to form new, genetically identical individuals. Snakelock anemones produce clones by cleaving their cylindrical, polyp body shapes into 2 halves. This separation, known as binary fission, is how snakelocks can form dense colonies within rock pools. The exact science of sexual reproduction in anemones is still a mystery. What we do know is that the males release sperm into the water, which swim inside of the female, and fertilisation occurs inside of her. After this, the females release their fertilised eggs into the water to fend for themselves. These eggs develop into a planula, which are free-swimming larvae. Upon settling, these larvae grow into a hollow cylinder with tentacles surrounding the mouth. This structure is called a polyp, and anemones maintain this state for the rest of their life. From here on, anemones continue to grow until they are sexually mature and can release gametes of their own, beginning the process all over again. It's this constant reproductive cycle, along with its behavioural and physiological adaptations to ever-changing environments, which have been key contributors in anemones conquering the rocky shore. Although full understanding of these creatures is still out of our grasp, there is much more to them than first meets the eye.